This is Future Fork, a show that explores the world of food and the decisions we can make today that will shape our future. On the show, you'll hear from innovators in the food space. We'll have disruptive conversations with people from around the globe who are taking the lead on topics like food sustainability, ending world hunger, food security, and so much more. I'm your host, Paul Newnham. In this episode, we're talking to Peggy Chan, Executive Director of Zero Foodprint Asia and founder of Grassroots Pantry. Grassroots Pantry was Hong Kong's first carbon-neutral restaurant, and Peggy turned it into a launching pad for sustainability across Asia's food industry. Today, we're going to explore how she's revolutionizing food systems through regenerative agriculture and climate-focused solutions, connecting eaters, restaurants, and farms to drive impact, and what some of that impact has involved. We also talk to the importance of school meals and educating kids on new ingredients. You'll hear about her journey from chef to environmental change maker, how motherhood has impacted her, and what surprised her most about transforming the Asian food landscape. Let's get into it. Peggy, welcome to our show.
Thank you for having me. It's been a while.
Yeah, absolutely. Lots been happening in your life. You're a new mum.
Yeah, I've been a mama for over a year now.
What's been most surprising about being a mum?
How much time it takes out of you. You literally have no more time for yourself. Yeah, I thought running restaurants, being in food and beverage and hospitality for most of my life was time consuming and it takes everything out of you. But until you become a mother, you realize what that really means.
Absolutely. I've never had that experience, but I have very close proximity to a mother. And I can tell from the conversations and close observation the impact of raising little ones. So it's massive. Let's talk a little bit about your career and where you began. Where did you practice to be a chef?
My chefing experience started when I was 19. So prior to that, I had already been working in food and beverage. My first job was at this first Starbucks in Hong Kong when I was 16. But when I was 19, I decided that I didn't like the usual, normal kind of university route, and I needed to be with people who had similar passions as I did. And somehow chefing, just cooking, just became something that was available to me. So yeah, I started cooking, went to school at the Cordon Bleu in Ottawa in 2003.
And then you fast forwarded and you were the founder and executive director of Grassroots Initiatives, and you opened Grassroots Pantry in Hong Kong in 2012, which closed after 7 years. And so tell us a little bit about what was Grassroots Pantry and what was the core focus of that?
I would just want to backtrack a little bit in terms of how Grassroots was manifested. And it always had to do with the way that I felt about, first and foremost, how food was grown and how animals were raised. And so when I was a teenager, I decided that I didn't want to consume meat for the reasons of religion and spiritual reasons and obviously health. But only until later on, I think it was around 2005 to 2007 was when more and more magazines came about to talk about genetically modified organisms, and also the internet came about. So we were able to search easily about what were slaughterhouses like and how animals were being raised, how they're pumped with RBGH growth hormones, and that we're actually consuming all of this without our own knowledge. And at the same time, farmers are being forced to abide to such practices and participate in a system that wasn't actually good for them either. And so what I wanted to do was utilize a platform, however I could, or create a platform to raise awareness of how food is grown and how we should always support smallholder farmers, organic, and support them to not have to rely on chemicals and big oil fertilizers. So that's how Grassroots Pantry happened in 2012.
And what was it? Talk to us a little bit about how did that play out?
So when I was visualizing what Grassroots Pantry would be back in 2011, I wanted it to be a place where we could link producers and consumers together, help to educate consumers about how food is grown and how we can actually consume plant-based in a more holistic way and to prioritize nutrition. So back then, plant-based was like non-existent. All you would think of when it comes to vegetarian food is like the old school Buddhist places where they serve like soy, mock meats, or wheat gluten. So Grassroots Pantry was kind of gateway to introduce the community, introduce the Hong Kong citizens to what progressive, plant-based, delicious, home cooked, and also with every opportunity, we were introducing our clients, our customers with ingredients that were sourced from smallholder farmers or biodiverse ingredients and how we would utilize those ingredients in our menus that were seasonal. So that was the restaurant, cafe slash workshop space that would become a much bigger restaurant afterwards.
That would have been really challenging in Hong Kong to do in terms of connecting with farmers and to connect with ingredients. There's such a strong food scene, I guess, in Hong Kong. How did people respond to it?
It is. And I think because it was so unlike the norm and because it was started at a time where people were just talking about smallholder farmers and farms in Hong Kong in general, and that there was like this market that started that introduced artisanal foods, and these farmers would come on Sundays and Saturdays to showcase their produce. I think that's why at that moment in time, and it was a perfect moment in time, people were so interested in what we were doing. And yes, although it was challenging, and every customer that came through somehow had questions about, is this really from a local farm, or can you actually consume holistically and nutritiously and feed yourself well with a plant-based diet? We were able to convert a lot of people to first be open to the idea. So I think it was a challenging opportunity, but we took that opportunity and we thrived.
So after Grassroots Pantry closed, what did you transition to and what's changed and developed since then?
So when I first learned that I was pregnant, I came across a horoscope. This was in June of 2024. And that was when Jupiter was in Taurus. And that the last time that Jupiter was in Taurus was actually 12 years ago. So that would have been the time that I was manifesting Grassroots Pantry. So this 12-year cycle is kind of like foreshadowing what would happen in the next 12 years. And then it says like embrace this fresh start energy of the new solar cycle, leave the past in the rearview mirror and hit the gas. The next 12-year chapter awaits. So why I wanted to kind of bring this up before I bring up like the consultancy and Zero Foodprint has a lot to do with like how it coincides with where I am personally. The last 12 years was really about creating with my restaurant to give. In a restaurant space. We're constantly pumping out all of our energies, our food, our creativity, pushing myself to the limit in both my art and my advocacy. But at the same time, it was like a lone wolf. I think you will ask a lot of the chefs who are in that Chef's Manifesto space. In the last 12 years, it really felt like you were alone until you met someone who was similar in your advocacy. So, which is why Chef's Manifesto is amazing because then you have all these people who really think alike. So I think that the next 12 years since 2024 is really about collective action, of healing of communities and the regeneration of life on Earth. And this is, of course, easier said than done, right? Because the systems currently are set up for competition rather than collaboration. And I think that's where a lot of the frustration ends up happening is since we have transitioned away from the restaurant and became a consultancy. So we've done projects for clients where they wanted to maybe create a plant-based menu on their regular menu or open up a completely new concept that is plant-based focused, like a bubble tea. We started doing more of the consultancy stuff before we adopted also the nonprofit But the frustration is that we see a lot of this work as being piecemeal, and many businesses we speak with are still in that kind of all men for themselves mentality. So with a consultancy, we focus on educating and helping businesses make that transition to more sustainable, conscious sourcing or how they operate as well. But I think that since then, things have kind of like propelled, and this piecemeal work doesn't work without also doing something that is of a more scalable impact, which is where Zero Foodprint comes in.
So tell us a little bit about Zero Foodprint Asia, because you've been involved in a number of things with your consultancy. We'll talk about a couple of them, but Zero Foodprint Asia, what was the problem that you were trying to solve there, and how did that come as that kind of solution for collective action?
So Zero Foodprint Asia is the Asia arm of Zero Foodprint, which is headquartered in California. So they're a nonprofit that started in 2015 by restaurateurs, and their initial program was around carbon accounting. So basically, the life cycle assessment of the restaurant. So we were one of the first restaurants actually in Asia to go through a life cycle assessment. Grassroots Pantry did. This was in 2018. So we had learned about the nonprofit already. We knew where the money that was raised through our restaurant were going. So it was going into regenerative farming projects across California. Many of those farms were practicing managed grazing. So in 2021, that's when we saw like an opportunity to also bring Zero Foodprint into Asia because of the documentary Kiss the Ground. And then also this was when China and Hong Kong announced the net zero plans. So we saw that regenerative farming, or transitioning away from conventional farming through more sustainable practices, needs to happen. It's not new, right? But how do we do that? And so what Zero Foodprint does is we raise money through a 1% pledge at every restaurant checkout, and crowdfund it. That 1% becomes a grant. And that grant given to farmers help them make that transition possible. So we support them with materials, knowledge, capacity building, obviously all of the monitoring, and the soil measurements as well. So it's usually a 12-month project per farm.
And since you've started this, what's one of the most surprising or unexpected things that you've witnessed in trying to get this going?
On both sides, one on the business end in terms of getting restaurants and businesses on board, it is an absolute educational exercise. I've never realized how little people know about farming or where food comes from until I started Zero Foodprint. And this has a lot to do with where we are, but also even in places like Bali. The difference between conventional farming and more sustainable farming, the education is just simply not there. So that's quite surprising. And therefore, in order to get businesses on board, they need to know where the money is going. And they need to know how the funds are used, what the benefits are, what the impacts are, what do they get out of it. And that's a lot to be able to communicate for businesses in general who aren't businesses that prioritize environmental or social causes. So that would be on the business side. And then from the farm end, I would say the most surprising bit is how ready the farmers are to adopt these practices. What they really need is at the beginning some hand holding. And so the capacity building workshops and having someone on the ground to support them, to answer any questions, to solve any problems really do help them. Even if you give them the materials and the money, they wouldn't know where to use it or how to use it. And so that kind of consultancy right in the middle really does help them transition. And so once they have that knowledge, they can easily and quickly see the impact within 6 months to a year. The impact is huge. So just as an example, our project in Bali called Asangkara Way, they're practicing complex rice systems. So this is the regenerative form of rice farming in Bali. Since April 2024, it is now adopted by over 160 farmers across 8 subaks in Bali. And just from a year of measurement we're able to gather, they've informed us that there's been a 47% drop in cost of inputs and 15% drop in labor costs. There's been a 63% increase in profit versus their original conventional farming practices by the second cycle, mainly because of their second money generator, which is the ducks. We introduced the ducks and the fish into the ponds, into the rice systems, where they're helping to weed and they're also helping to feed their manure, their nutrients into the soil. But then at the same time, they can actually sell the duck eggs. They can sell the ducks as well. So that's where they see the increase in profit. And then within 3 cycles, the farmers are experiencing an average drop in pest intensity of about 43%. So these impacts are huge and it's so quick. So I think that's also the alarming part is we think that it's a 3 or 5 or 7 year transition before we see any impact. But actually within 1 year, you can already see quite a bit.
Those kinds of solutions, I'm looking back to look forward many ways, because I'm sure that, back in the past, they used to have ducks and fish in their rice paddies. And now, for whatever reason, as they scaled, they removed them. And so putting them back is showing that quick return and the benefits that you just mentioned, which are impactful.
Entirely. And all the farmers have mentioned this is how my father or my grandfather used to farm. But we've just broken up the farm ecosystems into solo or silo ecosystems. There's a duck farm for the ducks, and then there's a cattle farm for the cows. And then for the rice, we just spray it with pesticides and fertilize it.
So one of the other things that I know you've done a little bit of work on when you were in Hong Kong was around school meals, and International School Meals Day is coming up. And it's a day to focus on the importance of good nutritional food for school-age kids. And you ran a school meals summit a while ago in Hong Kong where you brought together a variety of stakeholders invested in school meals. Why was this something that you're passionate about and collaborating around?
Good nutrition and learning how to eat, and now especially now that I have a baby, really starts young. It starts at home, it starts in the school where they are going to be for most of the day. It has to begin when they first learn about what's tasty, but also what's nutritious. So what's a balanced diet? I was first inspired by Alice Waters when I first went to culinary school, and I had always wanted to do something similar. Of course, this was nothing even close. I guess in the future, I can manifest it. And I think that in Hong Kong, especially, where most of what children are fed are either processed food, packaged food, very uninteresting one food. There's such a huge opportunity for us to kind of get them interested about food, whether it's be eating food, treating food, respecting food. So that's why we partnered with TAS, the Alliance for Sustainable School, to introduce what a low carbon, healthy, balanced school meal would look like.
And I'm sure that the group that you were with really appreciated that kind of perspective and the flavor that you brought to the table.
Yeah, we also invited several chefs in Hong Kong who were kind of well known for cooking with plant-based dishes, but also creative dishes. And yeah, we're able to kind of step up and show how they would prepare these dishes that kids would generally love, and that they could prove that it was like low carbon. So yeah, you could use a platform to help calculate each meal's carbon impacts. Yeah.
What do you think are some of the trends that you're seeing at the moment going forward? What are some of the things that you think are going to be big over the next 5 years?
I do want to say there's more and more noise around regenerative foods, but I think we're way too ahead of ourselves if we want to be sourcing from regenerative farms because we're not there yet, especially in Asia. And so we often have to remind the businesses that we talk to that in order to do this properly, we absolutely have to support the transition and share the risk of transition with the farms. So we try to get the farms that these restaurants work with to help them transition as well. So I would move into other trends. Personally, I'm fascinated by the intersections of the gut and soil microbiome. at the restaurant previously, we've always kind of championed cultured fermented foods for the gut, especially to strengthen our immune functions. But only once I've started down the rabbit hole of kind of soil microbiology was when I realized how healthy crops actually rely on healthy soil. So that was something that I noticed the parallels of when we're talking about optimizing health. And I think that the gut microbiome and how we feed our gut microbiome is going to become something of the future.
So one thing that we like to ask everyone is a bit of a recurring question. What are you enjoying eating at the moment?
I don't have much time to cook. So it is going to be my first meal of the day with my baby, which is scrambled eggs. Scrambled free range eggs. That simple. And it's 3 eggs now because I need that protein and the fat, the healthy fats in the morning.
Absolutely. Do you add anything to it or you just scramble them straight?
Mostly it's just with ghee or olive oil. Sometimes we'll add some cheddar. We'll add some like mushrooms to it. Yeah.
Cool. Well, thank you, Peggy, for joining us on the show. Really appreciate chatting.
Thanks. Great seeing you. Hope you're well.
You've been listening to Future Fork, a show that explores the world of food and the decisions we can make today that will shape our future. Future Fork is produced by Disruptive Consulting Solutions and supports the SDG2 Advocacy Hub. For more info, head to the website futureforkpodcast.com. This show was produced with strategy and production support from Wavelength Creative. So you don't miss an episode of Future Fork, make sure to subscribe to or follow the show in your podcast app. And while you're there, leave us a 5-star review. It really helps others find the show. I'm Paul Newnham, and I'll see you in the next episode.